So, usually when we talk about a professional license, there's this assumption of permanence, right?
Right. Yeah. Like
Mhm.
it's forever.
Exactly. Think about it. You pass the bar exam to become a lawyer, or you finish your residency, you get your medical license, and you frame it. You hang it up on the wall in your office, and short of doing something terribly wrong, it just stays there.
Right. It means you've arrived.
Yeah, you're officially in the club. But then, you look at the historical records for the people we've trusted with shaping the minds of the next generation, and you realize the rules were completely different.
Completely different.
So welcome to this deep dive for the Rethink History series, Who Taught the Teachers? We're framing this as Episode 4, The Certificate. And we're really treating this one like a bureaucratic detective story.
I love that framing.
We are investigating a single, incredibly powerful piece of paper, the teaching license.
And, to really understand the gravity of this, we need to pull the history out of the textbook and put it right into your hands. So for you listening, I want you to picture the central artifact of this deep dive.
Which is just a fascinating document.
It really is. It's an 1876 teaching certificate, and it belonged to a 17-year-old Iowa girl named Ella Pullman.
And right away, we have to kind of throw out the modern image of a license, right? Because this isn't some fancy diploma on thick parchment with gold foil.
Oh, not at all. It's a very practical, almost like a receipt-like slip of paper.
Hmm.
And written right on its face, just in ink, are her exact percentage scores in various subjects.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the real kicker with this artifact.
Mm.
That piece of paper was valid for exactly 6 months.
6 months. I mean, it's basically a learner's permit.
Exactly. And today, what we're going to do is trace how this fragile little slip of paper evolved from, a quiet interview in a local minister's parlor to a grueling Saturday county exam, all the way into the massive multi-layered state apparatus we have today. But the burning question we're going to keep coming back to is this.
Mm.
After 200 years of constantly raising the bar, does this piece of paper actually certify anything real about a teacher's ability?
It is such a fascinating question. And to answer it, we really have to go back to the mid-19th century. Because if you wanted to get a license to teach back then, you were entering the era of the county examination.
Right, movement one of our story.
Yeah. Picture this. You've been working on a farm all week, or maybe you're, already teaching in a one-room schoolhouse somewhere, and you have to give up your Saturday to head down to the county courthouse just to prove you belong in a classroom.
And the sheer power dynamic of that Saturday is wild to think about. The person sitting behind the desk at that courthouse is the county superintendent,
The ultimate gatekeeper.
the ultimate gatekeeper of the era. The superintendent didn't just administer a test that came down from the state. They wrote the exam questions themselves. Yeah, they graded the papers. They ran the local summer training institutes. They had near total unchecked power over who got to stand at the front of a classroom in that specific county.
Which, brings us back to Ella Pullman's experience. Let's look at what she actually went through, because we have her certificates.
Right.
In April 1876, she walks into the Guthrie County Courthouse in Iowa. She sits down for this written exam, and she is tested on subjects like orthography, which, by the way, is just the 19th century way of saying spelling.
Exactly. Spelling, physiology, arithmetic, history.
Yeah, and her scores come back ranging from 50 to 95% on these tests. But these certificates weren't pass-fail. They were graded essentially like produce.
I love that analogy. It was first, second, or third class. It's exactly like grading eggs.
Right. And because Ella earned a second-class certificate that day, she was only granted that tiny 6-month window.
Yeah, and a third-class certificate was basically a temporary, desperate measure, just to get a warm body in a room.
Which meant she was trapped on this absolute treadmill. I mean, she had to re-earn this paper every few months. If I try to put myself in her shoes, it's just mind-boggling.
It sounds exhausting.
It does. I mean, for everyone listening, imagine having to retake your college finals plus your driver's test every 6 months just to keep the job you already have.
Right, just to keep doing what you did yesterday.
Exactly. And the truly wild part is, if you look at the test, it mostly just tested the exact same content her students were learning, maybe just one grade level up. Out of the whole exam, there was only one single subject that gave a nod to actual pedagogy.
Yeah, they call it theory and practice of teaching.
But the rest was just proving you could, do the math yourself. I just can't imagine putting up with that level of constant scrutiny. There must have been some kind of massive carrot dangling in front of these teachers to keep them in the system rather than just walking away.
Well, the carrot was time, and the grades were the incentive structure. If you wanted a first-class certificate, which, could run up to 24 months and actually give you a little breathing room,
Yeah.
you had to prove you were actively improving.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, teachers attended what were called county normal institutes.
And normal here doesn't mean like average, right? It comes from the French école normale.
Right, exactly.
The idea of establishing the norms or the standards of teaching.
Precisely. So these normal institutes were essentially mandatory summer training camps run by, you guessed it, that same powerful county superintendent.
Of course.
And Ella attended these for years, and it paid off for her. She eventually scored 97% on her institute exams and managed to lock in those coveted first-class renewals through the 1880s.
Yeah.
It was a 25-year grind.
A 25-year grind. And, there is a darker side to this hyper-local system, which is just the sheer bureaucratic cruelty of it.
Yeah.
Because these certificates were so localized, they were incredibly fragile. So in 1877, Ella's father passes away.
Which is tragic.
It is. And suddenly, teaching isn't just a pursuit for her. It's her primary livelihood. She has to move to neighboring Taylor County. But the second she crosses that county line, her Guthrie County certificate, the one she worked so hard for, is entirely worthless.
It just evaporates.
Evaporates. She is grieving her father. She has to relocate. And her license to earn a living just vanishes. She had to start all over again from scratch and earn a new 10-month certificate in Taylor County.
It really highlights the friction of the era. Ella's problem, this certificate dying at the county line, was incredibly common. Because by the 1890s, there were an estimated 3,000 separate local licensing authorities in the United States.
3,000.
3,000. Now, we should be totally fair here and flag for you that historians will tell you that 3,000 is an order of magnitude estimate. It's not a precise census.
Sure, nobody in 1890 was keeping a perfect spreadsheet of every township and district board.
Right. But the core reality is rock solid. The vast majority of teachers received their license from local officials, which created this massive, chaotic patchwork.
So if you are a state official looking at this chaotic patchwork where certificates are basically meaningless 20 miles down the road, your obvious move is to step in and try to standardize it.
Exactly.
Which sparks this massive, quiet administrative revolution, the state takeover of teacher licensing.
And it is a remarkable sweep of history when you look at the timeline. It starts early in places like New York, which authorizes its state superintendent to issue statewide certificates as early as 1843.
Wow, that early.
Yeah, and Indiana follows suit in 1852.
Yeah.
But it's a very slow burn. By 1898, only 12 states run state-controlled systems. But then the momentum really shifts. Fast forward to 1937, and 41 states issue licenses exclusively at the state level.
That's a huge jump. And the narrative you usually hear is that this was necessary for quality control. Because let's be honest, those local county exams were notoriously uneven.
No, absolutely.
On one hand, you had genuine, rigorous screens like Ella's test, where they were calculating exact percentages. But on the other hand, the county exam system could be an absolute den of favoritism.
All right.
I mean, the person grading your test was often your neighbor or your family's creditor or a political ally.
The potential for corruption was just immense.
Right. But I do want to push back a little on the idea that this state takeover was just this smooth, natural march of progress where everyone agreed centralization was better.
Because it wasn't.
No, it was highly contested, and in some places, it actually went backward. Like, take California. In 1863, they actually had state control. But their new constitution in 1879 handed that licensing power back to the city and county boards.
Which is wild.
Right. So a state credential that used to run for years was suddenly stripped of its power, and teachers were back to only being certified in their specific county. It was a vicious tug of war.
It absolutely was. And this tug of war wasn't just about standardizing quality. Historians David Angus and Jeffrey Morrill bring a really crucial perspective to this. They argue the state takeover was also, fundamentally, a power grab.
A power grab.
Yes. Now, it's worth noting, just to be transparent, that their research on this was published in 2001 by the Fordham Foundation.
Right, which is a think tank that was heavily involved in modern policy debates over alternative certification.
Exactly. But regardless of modern policy fights, we have to look at the data. Their historical data on this centralization process is incredibly rigorous and impartial in its accounting.
And the logic of the power grab makes total sense.
Yeah.
Think about who is pushing for state control. State superintendents, the heads of those state-run normal schools, and university education departments.
Yes.
They wanted a monopoly. If they could convince the state to control the licensing and then require specific coursework to get that license, they could force teachers to buy their product.
Exactly. They're cornering the market on professional training. And rural communities recognize this immediately. They saw the shift away from local summer institutes toward distant, state-run normal schools as a fight over who owned the gate to the profession.
Right.
It meant poor, rural candidates now had to travel, pay tuition, and spend years away from home just to get a piece of paper they used to earn on a Saturday at the courthouse.
Which raises a really important labor question. How could states afford to keep ratcheting up these requirements? I mean, they are demanding more training, longer schooling, higher tuition costs.
Right.
Basic economics says if you make a job much harder and more expensive to get, you have to drastically raise the salary to attract applicants. But they didn't really do that.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
Because they had a captive audience.
And this is the hidden subsidy that this entire series tracks. It is so crucial. The states could raise the bar all they wanted because they had a massive pool of talented, brilliant women who were legally and socially barred from almost every other professional avenue. They couldn't go be trial lawyers. They couldn't be structural engineers. The requirements for teaching rose, but the wages didn't have to, because where else were these brilliant women going to go?
That underlying labor economics piece is the hidden engine driving this entire history. The state can demand a bachelor's degree on a meager salary only if the talent pool has no exit strategy.
Right. So as the state consolidates power and these universities and normal schools become the gatekeepers, the mechanics of how you get the license changes completely. The actual written examination, the Saturday courthouse test, slowly begins to die. It gets displaced by the transcript.
The diploma itself becomes the license.
And the mechanism they used to do this was the exemption. By 1897, 28 states were already exempting normal school or university graduates from taking the licensing exams altogether. Yeah. What started as a little perk for the highly trained became the only road. In 1919, Vermont completely abandons exams entirely. And this ascent is incredibly rapid. By 1953, 25 states require a full bachelor's degree just for elementary teaching, and the old exams were practically dead. The edifice looked ironclad.
It did. The modern architecture, go to college, get a degree, get a license, was basically in place. But then that ironclad system ran completely out of bodies.
Right.
The Second World War hits.
And the edifice just cracks wide open. Districts are suddenly hemorrhaging teachers to the military and to war production plants. And the numbers are just staggering. California alone saw an estimated 600,000 teachers enter and leave the profession between 1939 and 1945.
600,000. And what do gatekeepers do when the line of applicants disappears? They open the gates.
A great way to visualize this for everyone listening is that the certification bar isn't a permanent structural wall. It's actually a release valve on a steam pipe.
Oh, that's good.
When the pressure drops, you open the valve. Let's look at the national numbers. In 1940, before the U.S. entered the war, there were 2,305 emergency certificates issued nationally.
Yeah.
By the war's end, there were over 108,000 teachers working on emergency credentials.
That is basically a normal year's entire national intake of teachers.
Exactly. A century of rigorous bar raising, of demanding degrees, and normal school training was just suspended in 5 years because they simply needed warm bodies in the classrooms.
It proves that the requirements were always a function of the labor supply, not a fixed scientific standard of quality. When that captive pool of talent drained, the essential requirements suddenly became very optional.
So after the war, they have this massive hodgepodge of highly trained teachers and emergency credentialed teachers. How do they clean up the slate?
They don't. They just stack on top of it. Our modern system is essentially a geological column. If you dig down, you can see every single reform era we just talked about stacked on top of each other.
Okay, let's dig into that column. The base layer, layer 1, is the tiered system. This is the direct descendant of Ella Pullman's second and first class papers.
Right.
Today, nearly every state issues a provisional or initial license to beginners, which then converts to a professional license after a few years of practice, mentorship, and usually some more continuing education requirements.
Then you have layer 2, which is the return of the test.
Ah, the test comes back.
It does. The state realized that just having a college transcript didn't guarantee the teacher actually knew the material, because college quality varied so wildly. So the National Teacher Examinations debuted in 1940. By the 1990s, this transitioned into the Praxis series. And then in 2001, No Child Left Behind comes along with its highly qualified teacher mandate, making standardized content testing nearly universal again. Honestly, if Ella Pullman time traveled to the early 2000s and was handed a Praxis content exam, she would recognize the genre instantly.
That is so true. Then we built Layer 3, the gold standard. In 1986, the Carnegie Task Force released a major report called A Nation Prepared.
Right.
This led directly to the creation of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards in 1987, with the first 81 teachers officially certified in 1995. Now, this is important to distinguish. This isn't a baseline license to get into a classroom.
Yeah.
It's a voluntary, premium portfolio assessment. It's meant to be a mark of true excellence above the state floor.
But then we get to Layer 4, and this is where the system starts to really buckle under its own weight. In the 2010s, there was a huge push to make the Baseline License Act more like that premium national board standard.
Yeah.
This led to something called the EdTPA.
Right. And we should probably explain how a portfolio assessment like EdTPA actually works in practice, because it's intense. You aren't just sitting down and filling out bubbles on a Saturday.
What's the part of it?
You are writing massive, highly detailed lesson plans. You have to set up a camera in the back of your classroom and record raw video of yourself teaching. Then you have to write extensive analytical reflections on that video and on your students' work.
It was incredibly demanding. It was built at Stanford and officially scored by Pearson, and it rolled out in 2013. But it faced massive criticism almost immediately.
Yeah, I remember that.
The sheer cost to the applicant was hundreds of dollars. People hated the fact that private corporations were outsourcing the scoring, and there were deep, deep concerns over disparate pass rates among different demographic groups.
The pushback was so intense that by April 2022, the New York Board of Regents actually voted to scrap the EdTPA requirement entirely.
Which leaves us staring right at the awkward answer to our burning question.
The elephant in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After 200 years of county exams, university transcripts, praxis tests, and massive video portfolios, does any of this predict how well a teacher actually teaches?
Here's where the story gets really sobering, especially if you love bureaucratic order. A massive study by economists Kane, Rockoff, and Stager looked at classrooms in New York City. They didn't just look at credentials. They looked at actual student outcomes. They measured the value added, meaning how much a teacher improved their students' math and reading scores over the course of a year compared to where those students started.
It's one of the most rigorous ways to measure actual classroom impact.
And they compared 3 distinct groups. Traditionally certified teachers who went through the whole university process, alternatively certified teachers like Teach for America, and completely uncertified teachers working on emergency waivers.
And what they found is just wild.
It is. The difference in student outcomes between those categories is tiny. It is completely dwarfed by the massive variations within those groups.
Exactly. You can have a teacher with a master's degree, a fully cleared traditional license, and top praxis scores who just struggles to move the needle for their students at all. And right down the hall, you can have someone on an emergency uncertified waiver who is an absolute natural, driving incredible student growth.
Wow.
The credential simply doesn't tell you which one is which.
Now, to be fair to the system, and we should flag this honestly, the certificate isn't entirely meaningless. Licensure tests and board certifications do have weak positive correlations with effectiveness.
Right. It's not a total coin flip,
Yeah.
but it is just that, a very weak signal.
So the license is basically a floor. It's a filter determined entirely by whatever the labor market of the moment allows the state to set.
Yep.
When they have plenty of applicants, they demand a portfolio and a master's degree. When there is a shortage, they issue waivers. It is not, and really never has been, a permanent prophecy of skill.
That is the perfect way to summarize it. The certificate tells you the holder cleared the administrative hurdle of their specific era. That's it. And I want you, the listener, to think about the gatekeepers in your own industry.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, whether you are in tech, healthcare, finance, or the skilled trades. How much of the credentials you are required to hold actually predict your daily competence on the job? And how much of it is just regulating the labor supply to protect the profession?
That is such a crucial way to look at our modern economy, and it brings up a final provocative thought for you to mull over. Throughout this deep dive, we've seen that the greatest mechanism for keeping schools staffed with high-quality talent wasn't actually the strictness of the certificate.
Yeah.
It was that hidden subsidy. It was the historical lack of career options for brilliant women.
The captive pool.
Exactly, the captive pool. So what happens to the quality of our schools and the entire complex certification apparatus when those women are finally allowed to become doctors, lawyers, and engineers?
When the captive pool drains, the whole system faces a reckoning. They can no longer demand maximum training for minimum pay.
And we are going to explore exactly how the institutions that handed out those transcripts dealt with their own reckonings. Next time in episode 5, Normal School U, we'll see what happened when the very institutions training teachers decided they wanted to climb the academic status ladder themselves and abandon their original mission altogether. You won't want to miss it. Like and subscribe. It really helps the channel reach others.